Hello, my name is Michael Stolberger. I'm Director of Property and Environmental Resources for Blue Earth County. I'm also the county's Elections Administrator. This is a continuation of our series of recap and review videos of our in-person election judge training. These videos can be reviewed by anyone who's interested in learning more of what our election judges were trained on to be successful in our polling places in Blue Earth County. It is important to note that these videos are not an alternative to the in-person training. In order to serve as an election judge in Blue Earth County, you must complete in-person training. If you're interested in being an election judge, please sign up on the Blue Earth County website so that we can include you in any future trainings. This video will focus on the equipment that's used in our polling places on election day. Information on the opening and closing of the equipment were also included in those videos and in that part of our in-person training. However, it's also brought back here as an inclusive document and presentation for judges who may be more interested in the equipment specifically. There are three pieces of equipment used in the polling places on election day. That's the DS200 tabulator or ballot counter, the Express Vote, which is our assisted voting device, and our poll pads. Those are our electronic rosters to check in pre-registered voters and also register voters on election day. We also have a DS450 tabulator, which is also known as a central count tabulator, that processes the ballots that are returned via the mail process as part of absentee voting or mail balloting. We have about 6,000 to 7,000 voters who vote by mail ballot automatically as part of every election, and those voters, when they return their ballots, have them processed on our central count machine. All elections equipment used in the state of Minnesota must be certified at federal and state levels before it can be used. Additionally, the equipment must be tested and validated at the county level before each and every election. This is called preliminary or logic and accuracy testing, and it is where each piece of equipment is reviewed and protocols are followed to ensure that it is going to perform as required by state law in counting the votes as indicated by voters. There is also what's called a public accuracy test before each and every election. This test is publicly noticed in the newspaper as well as on the county's website and through social media channels, and members of the public are welcome to watch election judges, each representing the major political parties in the state, conduct a final test of the equipment before it is deployed on election day. This testing ensures that the way that a voter casts their ballot, as indicated on the paper ballot, is counted by the machine through the tabulation process correctly. All of our equipment relies on a human readable and human auditable paper ballot. This is because we have significant auditing processes after the election. We audit to make sure that every ballot is accounted for and every voter who signed in and took a voter's oath is accounted for through the election process. We also conduct a randomized audit of performance of the equipment after the general election. This is done in a public setting where individuals can observe a recount of a randomized sample of ballots to ensure that the actual ovals and voter selections on those ballots match the results for that precinct and that polling place. Our canvassing board, made up of county commissioners, a clerk of the court, and the mayor of the city of Mankato, will randomly select 3 precincts at a minimum to do a hand recount to prove after the election that the tabulated results match the actual voter intent on the paper ballots from that precinct on election day. I'd also like to point out that none of the equipment in Blue Earth County that tabulates results connects to the internet. This includes our ballot counters, and it also includes our programming and other results reporting computers. There is no connection capability for those devices, and they will not connect to the internet. Other counties in the state of Minnesota do have the ability to connect after the polls close on election day, and other states may have other requirements. However, in Blue Earth County, our tabulating equipment will not and does not connect to the internet. For our election judges, we'll also point out that the state law requires our equipment to be used since it has been certified and passed these testing protocols. There are no provisions in law that would allow for a hand count of ballots or a review of audit of the ballots in the polling place on election day after the polls close. The ballot counter used in Blue Earth County is called the DS200. This is an automatic optical scan ballot tabulator, and it counts the votes cast by voters on paper ballots. These pieces of equipment are specific to the precinct, ensuring that only ballots issued by judges in that precinct are accepted on election day. It also captures images of write-ins for elections that have write-in contests, and there's also an emergency slot to allow for uninterrupted voting in case the tabulator becomes unusable during election day. There's a battery backup to ensure that there's power in cases of power failure, and there's also a permanent count on the tabulator so that we know that every ballot that enters the tabulator and is processed is accounted for. The tabulator does require a 6-foot buffer for privacy when voters are feeding ballots in the tabulator, and we'll also point out that this piece of equipment is manufactured by Election Systems and Software, which is based out of Omaha, Nebraska. Election Systems and Software is one of the 3 providers of elections equipment that are certified in the state of Minnesota, and they have a very large foothold in the state of Minnesota. The ballot tabulator gets set up prior to the election day starting at 7 a.m. It is set up by 2 election judges, and this process should occur as early as possible on election morning. So this is one of the first things our judges will do to ensure that it's ready to go at 7 a.m. As has been mentioned, 2 judges of different parties must take part in this process because of the importance of setting up the tabulator and making sure that it will accept ballots and count them on election day. We need to make sure that it's plugged into power, and we need to make sure that it is unlocked and ready to accept ballots through the scanning and transport process. The instructions live on the back side of the ballot counter in a pouch, and the 2 judges will follow those steps to essentially open the polls and ensure that no votes have already been cast on the machine. This piece of equipment must be ready at 7 a.m. for the first voter to cast their ballot. When we close the tabulator, it is important to remember that we do not close it until that last voter who is in line and eligible to vote casts their ballot at 8 p.m. The closing process will be completed by 2 judges of different political parties, and the checklist also lives on the back of the DS200 tabulator. The judges will follow the instructions provided only after the head judge has authorized them to begin the closing process, and reports will run from the tabulator representing the official results of your polling place in terms of the number of votes cast and how many votes were cast for each candidate and for each contest. One of the last things your head judge will do is to take possession of an encrypted or secure thumb drive. That thumb drive has an electronic or digital version of the printed out reports from your polling place. That helps the county expedite the reporting process to the state. However, it is your results tape that you sign as election judges as part of the closing process that will be the results for your polling place. There are some troubleshooting items to consider as you're working with the ballot counter or our DS200. If it is not accepting a ballot, you'll want to make sure that the transfer mechanism is fully unlocked. We'll also want to make sure that the ballot is tried different orientations. It will accept all orientations of a ballot, face up or face down, top in or bottom in first. All of those orientations are accepted, and so sometimes a voter just needs to try a different route to see if the ballot will grab by the machine. We also want to help keep the tabulator clean. Food and beverage should not be allowed within 6 feet of the tabulator, much like we have a 6-foot buffer for voters to feed their ballot in privately. If you have any issues starting up the tabulator on election morning, call our office immediately so that we can help resolve those. Oftentimes the issue is related to whether or not it is plugged into power, and so we want to make sure that we're always plugged into power when we're talking about the DS200 tabulator. You can ensure that it's plugged into power throughout election day because there will be an animated screen asking voters to cast their ballot. If it is not plugged into power, that screen is frozen, and so you'll very quickly be able to see whether or not you have power going to the tabulator. Remember, the poll pads are our electronic rosters. They are used to check in voters and verify the eligibility of voters. They're also used to register new voters who need to register on election day in your precinct. They are specific to your precinct, so make sure that you're using poll pads for the location you're working on election day. And also know that that's going to help you make sure that voters who do not reside in your precinct are not able to register on election day in your polling place. We want to always keep our poll pads plugged in so that they're staying fully charged and ready for use in case we would have power failures. And then also remember to follow the step-by-step prompts and screens, as that will assure that you're registering voters correctly and you're completing any of the check-in processes that are required. The poll pads do connect to a secure hotspot on election day to ensure that voters are not able to vote more than once in Blue Earth County, and so we want to always make sure that that connection is established and that our devices are communicating. The poll pads are manufactured by a company called Knowing. That company is based out of St. Louis, Missouri, and they are the only provider of poll pads or electronic rosters in the state of Minnesota currently. They are also used across the entire country. There are millions of poll pads deployed and used on election day across the country. When setting up the poll pads, remember that election judge party affiliation is not required. Any judge can set up the poll pads. We match color-coded dots to make sure that we've set up the devices correctly, and these need to be ready at 7 a.m. Be certain to match the poll pad itself to the printer. They are both numbered and we need those numbers to match so that they can communicate throughout election day. As was already mentioned, be sure we're plugged into power throughout election day and that we have a secure connection to the hotspot. That hotspot ensures that voters are voting only one time in Blue Earth County. When we're putting away the poll pads at the close of polls, we want to again remember that any judge can do this. Party balance is not required to put away our poll pads. We want to make sure that we have at least one poll pad fully operational until that last voter casts their ballot. And we want to also make sure that we record the number of voters checked in on each poll pad and the number of voters registered on each poll pad before we shut them down. Your head judge will need this information. As another reminder, don't forget to pack up the hotspot. That will be put away as one of the last tasks on election night after we've transferred data. The optional open house that our election judges were invited to attend allowed them to use the poll pads and other equipment on a hands-on basis to actually experience what it is like to check in voters. However, this slide gives a recap of that process in case you're looking for a reminder. First off, we search for the voter's name using a few characters from their last name and a few characters from their first name. This returns a list of voters who are pre-registered in your precinct. You select that voter's record so that you can see additional information, including their date of birth, on a screen that's slightly easier to read. Once you're certain that you have the correct voter, by having them confirm their address to you, you're able to spin the poll pad around to the voter so that they can actually read the oath and sign to their eligibility to vote in that election. Once the voter has signed on the oath, the poll pad screen is returned to the election judge, who submits that record after one final review. Once that record is submitted, the voter is checked in and a receipt prints out that has the voter's oath and the voter's electronic signature on it. That is the election judge's record that that voter has checked in. The other receipt that prints is called a voter receipt or ballot receipt. That receipt is provided to the voter as their proof that they have checked in, and that authorizes them to receive a ballot from the ballot judge. We want all of our judges to know that we have new poll pads deployed for the 2024 election as part of a replacement and an update process. The software is also updated, so there are some new looks and features, but essentially the poll pads operate the same as they always have. One thing that you might notice is that we have some new printers as well as part of our replacement and updating process. Those printers load the receipt tape differently, so follow the instructions that are provided. Also remember that election judges will have voters sign on the poll pad screen to capture an electronic signature instead of using pens. We'll also point out that due to Apple programming, the birthday selection during the election day registration process is clunky. When you're adding a voter's date of birth through the registration process, you'll select the date of birth field. Then you will open up the calendar by selecting the month and year first so that you can scroll to the correct year. Once you've selected the correct year, then you'll scroll to the correct month, and then you'll be able to tap on the date that voter's date of birth actually is. We must do it in that order of year, month, then date in order for it to be completed on the poll pad. There are a series of tips and tricks that experienced judges already know when it comes to using the poll pads. You'll also have these tips and tricks in your poll pad kits so that you can review them throughout election day. One of the most important things to remember is that we want to take our time with the devices. The poll pad will be preloaded with addresses and other information, and so if you're taking your time and allowing the poll pad to help you out, you'll be more successful. Also, don't forget to use the advanced search function when searching for voters before you complete the registration process. I'll also make note one more time that driver's licenses can be used during the check-in and registration process. And in fact, the poll pad will allow you to scan the code on the back of a driver's license to help with the check-in process and the registration process. But remember, it is not required in Minnesota, and we need to verbally announce that to other voters when you're using a driver's license. Let's next talk about our Express Vote. The Express Vote is our assisted voting device, and remember this replaces the Omni ballot. For our experienced judges, the Omni ballot was in that gray carrying case and it had a large printer that was attached to it. The Express Vote now replaces that and allows any voter to vote as independently as they wish. Again, any voter can use this as a way to demonstrate the ballot or display the ballot in a larger print. It also helps with reading for voters who may need that additional assistance, and it also helps with marking for anyone who can't hold a pen or use a pen to fill in the ovals. These devices are also precinct specific, so they will be labeled for your precinct as you're setting them up. They use what's called a universal blank ballot stock or card, which looks different than the ballot, but it does work as a replacement and it is accepted by the ballot tabulator. We want to make sure that we're ensuring privacy of the Express Vote for any voter using it, so pay attention to that as you're setting it up on election morning. The Express Vote is also manufactured by Election Systems and Software, that same company based out of Omaha, Nebraska. When we're setting up the Express Vote in the morning, remember that your head judge will be involved to open the side compartment and turn the power button to the on position. We follow the on-screen prompts and we make sure that the headphone is plugged in and then it is ready for voting. You want to make sure the Express Vote is set up for privacy, but that we're also being careful of any cord or trip hazards. When we're closing the Express Vote, the first and most important thing to remember is that the Express Vote must stay fully operational until the last voter has fed his or her ballot into the tabulator. Only at that time can we start closing it, and the Express Vote can be closed by any election judge. Party balance is not required. Your head judge will open the side compartment to toggle the power switch to the off position, and at that point the election judge can return all of the materials to the Express Vote case and then bring the Express Vote to the head judge. The instructions for opening and closing the Express Vote are inside the side pocket and actually inside the headphone compartment case. When we talk about troubleshooting the Express Vote, there's a few things to keep in mind. First off, if voters are having trouble feeding a blank ballot into the Express Vote, an election judge can offer assistance. The corner cut must be inserted first in the upper right-hand corner in order for it to be accepted by the Express Vote. The Express Vote will be instructing a voter to do that if they're listening to the audio instructions through the headphone. The Express Vote should stay clean at all times. Food and other objects should not be near the Express Vote throughout Election Day. You'll know that the Express Vote is plugged in by looking at an indicator just below the screen. There is a light indicator next to the check battery status. We want to make sure we have 2 green lights in that area. This is also near where the headphones are plugged in, so you can check to make sure those are plugged in throughout Election Day. The Express Vote will keep a voting session active for at least 5 minutes. After 5 minutes of inactivity, an idle voting session prompt will show on the screen, asking the voter if they are going to continue voting. The voter just needs to press any button to continue voting if this is a concern or issue. Their voting session will be preserved. It does not clear out. This is just a prompt to make sure that the voter knows that they can ask for assistance if they need any assistance, or they can also exit and return their ballot card if they're wishing not to vote using the Express Vote. We have additional information for our election judges regarding how the equipment is used on Election Day and some of our setup and and closing instructions. And so we would encourage judges to visit our election judge training website on the Blue Earth County website. The Secretary of State's office also has additional election judge training that's available on their website. As another reminder, the Election Judge Guide will have general information about equipment in the polling place, and that's available on the Secretary of State's website, or it's also available as a link through the Blue Earth County Election Judge Training website. As is always the case, if there's any additional questions, contact the Elections Office via phone or email, and we'd be happy to help you with those questions. As one more reminder, this video is not an alternative or replacement to the in-person election judge training. If you wish to be an election judge in Blue Earth County, you must sign up on the county website so that we can get you included in any future election judge training classes. Thank you.